So in this video, we're going to talk about what to do when starting a new job. How do you start in that role? How do you make a great first impression? What do you do when you're first getting into a new job? Now, a lot of people have apprehensions about this, and they really shouldn't, just because just having the right mindset going into a new job can be tremendously helpful. So this is the best advice that I've found on this. Cutting edge, just the best mindset to go into any new position with. So here it is. So when you enter a new career or a new environment, you move into a world with its own rules, its own procedures, and its own social dynamic. Every workplace has its own conventions. It has its own rules and behaviors and its own work standards, okay? There are also all kinds of power relationships that exist between the individuals in that space, okay? All of this represents a reality that transcends your individual needs and desires. It's really important to understand that. And so your task upon entering this world is to observe and to absorb its reality as deeply as possible. You want to understand what's going on in this new environment that you're in. You want to take everything in, you want to study it. You want to be basically an anthropologist, because so many people go into new roles and they're trying to assert themselves in that environment and prove themselves too quickly. And if you do that, it can put off a lot of people, and you don't want to do that. You want to gain friendships, gain understanding, and if anything, gain admiration from those people by demonstrating a willingness to learn in an easy way. So this is really critical. Again, your task when entering this new environment is to observe and absorb its reality as deeply as possible. The greatest mistake you can make in this environment in the initial months of your new role is to imagine that you have to get attention, impress people, and improve yourself. So if you do this and you start making noise too quickly and you're the new person in the company, you're going to turn off a lot of people. And some people do this and they end up getting fired right away from the company. You want to come in, you want to be easygoing, you want to be easy to get along with. Now, if you're going in as a CEO or in an executive role, you still want to be a person who's going in and learning. If you come in and you act like you know everything, it's going to put off other people. So going in with an understanding of, hey, I want to learn more, I want to understand more about this company, its culture, the people, what makes everybody tick, is tremendously important to your success at this new company and this new role of yours. Now, these thoughts of trying to get attention, impress people, improve yourself, they're going to dominate your mind, and you really need to understand this from the beginning. So you need to close that off from influencing you. Everybody wants to get attention. Everybody wants to get noticed. Everybody wants to get praised. And everybody wants to start achieving right away. So any positive attention you receive initially is deceptive, okay? And it's not based on your skills or anything real, and it can turn against you. Instead, what you want to do is acknowledge the reality around you, and you want to submit to it. You want to understand as much about it as possible. You want to basically put yourself a little bit lower, take a more humble approach to things, realize that you're not the most important person there, and that you've got a lot to learn. And so that takes on putting really the clothes of humility and getting yourself to really learn as much as possible. It's really just putting on that that beginner's mindset and saying, what can I learn about this company so I can give more in the future? If you're starting to say, hey, I really need to make an impression right away, I really need to wow these people, that's kind of looking at things in a real short-term mindset. Whereas you want to take the long-term mindset, which is, how can I understand as much possible so I can give the most value long-term, okay? That's important to know. So muting your colors and keeping it in the background as much as possible, remaining passive, and giving yourself the space to observe is absolutely 100% critical. You also want to drop any preconceptions you have about this world that you're entering, also the people that are in it. So maybe you've heard some things about the company that you're joining that's really favorable. You've heard great things in the news, and maybe you have heard some things that are less favorable. You want to drop any preconceived notions and judgments that you have before going into this role. It's really big, because if you go in and you're judging things and that's kind of coloring your vision, you may judge a book by its cover before ever even getting into chapter one. So dropping those preconceived notions, those judgments, anything that you think you've learned from the news, which is totally biased, I think everybody knows at this point, is to your advantage. You want to go in with a complete clean slate, and you want to give everybody the opportunity around you to, put their best foot forward and forge good relationships, just as you would want from them if you were coming into the company. So keep that in mind. If you impress people in these first few months, it should be because of your seriousness. It should be because of the seriousness of your desire to learn about that which is around you, not because you're trying to rise to the top before you are ready. And that's really key. There's so many people who go into companies right away. They want to be that rock star, that ace. They want to get recognition. And doing that, it just turns people off, and it makes more enemies than it does friends. And businesses are very political. Corporate cultures are very political. If you're talking about a corporate culture like Apple or Nike or Sony, these companies are very political. And you want to rub people the right way to form strong alliances for the long term. And forming strong alliances and friendships within a corporation, it takes time, and it's a long-term approach that usually wins. So you will be observing two essential realities in this new world that you're going into. First, you will discover the procedures that govern success in this environment. In other words, this is how they do things at the company you're joining. It's the rules that govern success in that environment. So some of these rules will be communicated to you directly, and some of them will be communicated in a different way. So HR may give you a policy book and guidelines, and they'll tell you different things. This is how we do this. This is how the 401k works. This is how the communication works in our company. This is your manager who you'll be directly communicating with. All of that is really direct communication. But you really need to pay close attention to those that are communicated indirectly. And what I mean by that is you really need to understand the culture, the values. You need to understand the concerns there and how people are interacting with one another, especially the power dynamics. If you're seeing a lot of communication flowing through a certain person, and all communication has to be passed through that person. That's a person who's got a lot of pull at that company, who's probably going to need a lot of respect from you to make a great impression from the very beginning. So these concern styles and values are considered important, and they are very much a reflection of the character of the man or the woman at the top. All of the values and rules that you see in place there, it's an expression typically of the CEO and the executive board. So if you start rebelling against these right away or thinking that you're going to change these going into a company, you're going to quickly find yourself on the outside. And that's not what you want to do. You want to find yourself over time moving up the corporate ladder. So you're going to have to submit to these rules, these policies, these procedures, these values, and be on board with them and drink that Kool-Aid. If you don't, then you may want to find a different company. But that's really the key, is you've got to submit to those, and you've got to embody those, really, if you're going to become effective there long term. Now, you can observe such rules by looking at those who are on their way to the top at the company. This is really critical. Who is making their way up in that hierarchy, and who are those who have that golden touch? Over time, and you won't understand and see who this is right away, but over time, over the course of months, and as months turn into years, you're going to clearly see who are the golden people at the company who have that golden touch, who are moving up, and who have influence with the stakeholders. This is very important to pay attention to, and it's important to take into inventory how they're doing this. How are they communicating? How are they speaking? How is their vocal inflections? The people who are highly influential at companies and consider those people with a golden touch are the people to study the most and model. And you can equally learn things about the people who are being reprimanded, or you can see that they've been hit by those reprimands, and maybe they seem jilted a little bit. And you can see those people who are not so much on the incline, but that are on the decline, and you can learn from their mistakes too, and study them a little bit as well, and take those into inventory as things not to do. So these are very, very critical things to do. So more tellingly, you can observe the people who are more awkward and have been chastised and made mistakes, and who have even been fired. Okay, so such examples are they really serve as negative tripwires, which you want to make sure that you avoid at all costs. And that is very critical to your long-term employment at whatever company you're just getting into now. So the second reality that you need to observe, like I said before, is the power relationships that exist within any group, okay? Who has the real control? With whom does all the communication flow through? Who is on the rise and who is on the decline? These procedures and political rules in these companies may seem dysfunctional, they may seem counterproductive, they may seem unfair, but you really need to take into consideration, are you there to change those initially, or are you to understand them and later on in your career at that company, once you've gained power, once you've gained influence much further down the road, only then is it really your position to try to influence them. Once you gain power and once you gain stature at that company and get promoted again and again and again, to where you can come back and change this. But for now, if you're coming into a company and you're the new person there, your role is to submit to these rules and understand and study the environment as much as humanly possible, which will allow you to become productive in that environment first. Second, it will allow you to, over time, make a positive, and I'm not talking about like some mind-blowing impression, but a positive impression on those around you, and steadily climb to the top of your organization. This is highly, highly critical. So your job is not to moralize or complain about the company, but to merely understand the way that things work to get a complete lay of the land. You're like an anthropologist studying an alien culture at this company, and your first few months in your first year. You really want to be attuned to the nuances there, and you want to be attuned to the conventions that take place at the company. You are not there to change the culture. You will only end up being killed, or in this case, getting fired from the company. Now, later when you have attained power and mastery in this area, in this company, you can rewrite or even destroy the rules at the company that you don't like. So there's people that have started in, I would say entry-level positions. Within 10 to 15 years, they've scaled into senior roles of the company. They don't try to change the dynamics and the values and the rules of the company in their first year. They do that in year 15. Or they go to a different company as they go up. They move to a different company and they gain higher stature through promotion and getting their foot in the door at different companies, and then they can influence companies at that level. But initially, you really need to be careful about how you're treading at these companies. It takes a lot of restraint to really make a positive impression upon people, and a lot of restraint to not let your ego get out of check. If you make too much noise too early on, again, it can really rub people the wrong way, so be careful of that. Now, what you also want to do is every task that you are given, no matter how small or how meaningful it is you want to take it because it offers you an opportunity to observe this environment that you're in, observe the workplace, observe the work culture, and the dynamic that exists in whatever department or division or team that you're on, okay? Now, no detail about the people or the team there is too trivial. You want to take details about everything that you hear or that you see because it is a sign for you to decode, okay? It's very important for you to know this. Over time, you'll begin to see and understand the reality that is eluded you at first. So the first day that you go into a company you're not going to understand the way the culture works, or that the information is exchanged, or the relationships that people have. Is this person on good terms with that person? Is there a little bit of friction between them? Are they best friends? Are they on the same team? Are they rising together? Or is this person trying to get that person on the outside of the company? You won't know this in your first day or your first week or your first month there, but within the first 12 months, closer to that first year or second year, you'll pretty much understand all of the unspoken communication at the company. So very important, a very important takeaway. So initially, you may assume somebody has great power at the company, and you may realize later on that their bark was louder than their bite. So initially, some people could seem, oh, they've got a lot of power, they're very well spoken, they're very much, assertive in the environment that they're in, they control the environment that they're in, and you may realize that afterward, that person may just be a low-level manager who doesn't have that much pull within the organization. So over time, by studying the dynamic and by studying your environment and analyzing it closely and even taking notes on it, you'll be able to distinguish over time the people you want to align yourself with who can help you be successful. And these are the people on the rise at the company, the golden ones, the people with the golden touch, who if you forge good relationships with and that you can get in their good graces, you can rise to the top as well. So as you amass more information about the rules and the power dynamics in your new environment, you can begin to analyze why they exist. It's very important. And how it relates to larger trends in your field and in this field. You move from observation to analysis and honing your skills only after months of giving this attention and study and thought. And you can start forming an action plan on how to align yourself with the right people in the company. This is also critical. And this is really a system that was designed by Charles Darwin. And Charles Darwin is known as basically the person, famous scientist, came up with the theory of evolution. And Charles Darwin, as a young, he was basically a young teenager. He was living with his family, and they were at the position where Charles was invited to go on a ship at a young age and go on a tour around the world. And he ended up going to South America, and he wasn't sure if he was going to take it. He was very nervous about leaving the United States, his hometown, his mom and dad. He was a young man, if I'm not mistaken, around 16 years of age, maybe 17 years of age. And he told his parents that he didn't want to go. He was too afraid to leave, and then he eventually did decide to go on the ship. And once he found himself on the ship going on this voyage, he was in a completely new environment, unlike he had ever been in before. And being on this ship, he found it very, very hard to survive with all of these brutal men who sailed the seas. And just to survive and cope on this ship and not rub people the wrong way, but to befriend people and get them to really warm up to him, he took a position of observing everybody, and he understood what made these people tick and how to get on their good side. And he realized that the more noise he made without knowing how this person ticked, he realized that the more trouble that it caused him. Whereas by studying and becoming that anthropologist of his environment, he was able to make friends, align himself with the people there who had great influence on the ship, and he was therefore able to get these people to do what he wanted and to take him to the places where he wanted to go and give him the resources on the ship that he needed. And he basically, by studying the power dynamics on this ship and just taking on a deep study of his environment, he was able to do this in the other environments in the world that we now live in. And he was able to discover thousands upon thousands of species of plants and animals, and became really the most famous anthropologist and scientists that ever lived, and it was because of his nature and the way that he approached his environment. He went on to really found the whole concept of survival of the fittest. So if you're going to be one of those people to survive in your company that you're going into, and over time continue to get promoted, continue to be well received by everybody around you, you're really going to have to take this kind of approach. And I think this analogy is fitting to what we're talking about here. It's very, very important. So there are several reasons why you must follow these critical steps that I'm outlining. First, knowing your environment inside and out will help you in navigating it. You want to be able to navigate your environment incredibly well. And the people who are at the vice president level, or who are at the director level, or the president or the CEO level, these are people who've been able to navigate that corporate ladder and that corporate environment. Again, it takes study, and it helps you avoid costly mistakes. So keep these things in mind. You are like a hunter. You are out there for knowledge in the forest, and to study the ecosystem that you're in as carefully as possible. And really, this is going to give you a lot of options for survival and for success. And second, the ability to observe your unfamiliar environment will really help you, and it will really become a lifetime skill that will benefit you in many ways. And you may go from one company and stay there for 4 years, like you are now, or maybe you'll go to a company and you'll stay there for 6 years, or maybe it's 2 years. But your ability to do this anytime you go into a new environment is going to be critical. And people who go in with a lot of preconceived notions and their ego very high up, they don't learn anything. And if you're not there learning anything, it really shows to the people around you. People can see the people who are there, who've got that beginner's mind, who are wanting to learn and wanting to over time give lots of value, as opposed to the people over here who are kind of like those know-it-alls. So you don't want to be that person. So just a little tidbit there. You want to have the habit of stilling your ego. This is from my notes here. And looking outward instead of looking inward. So stilling your ego and looking outward and learning and looking to absorb from what's around you is very valuable. You will see in any encounter what most people miss because they are thinking about themselves. And that is really the critical difference between those who rise to the top at companies over time and those who don't. It's the people who are always thinking about themselves that usually end up going the shortest amount of distance. So keep that in mind. You will cultivate a keen eye for human psychology, and that will strengthen your ability to focus. Finally, you'll become accustomed to observing first, basing your ideas and theories, having seen with your own eyes. Okay? So you'll be able to develop these theories by being cognizant as to what's taking place in your environment. And then you'll be able to analyze what you find, and this will be important in the next creative phase in your employment at the company. So the idea is to first learn and spend lots of time learning about your new environment. And then after you do that and you forge the right relationships and you understand the power dynamic and you understand the way that information flows, you can go on, after some time, it may be months in, it could be a couple years in, depending on what type of role you're going into, to where you can start creating and you can start having that ability to engage with people on a more, grounded and assertive level. Again, people who go in to make a lot of noise to begin with doesn't make a good impression. That willingness to learn, that beginner's mindset, stilling your ego, that will ensure a very successful start